Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Climb, the Confident Leader podcast, where we share stories of leaders moving from invisible to becoming an influencer. Today, I have an honor to introduce you to a guest who is a renowned shepherd on a global scale, who consciously gathers, stirs, and champions through unity consciousness the high level of integrity required to identify as a conscious leader. Over the decade, she has extensively worked with high level global decision makers from for profit and non profit global organizations seeking to change the narrative in how they hold a purposeful presence and consciously service the communities they locally and globally hold a presence in. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Roxanne Chaput for our 2 hour show. Welcome to the Climb Confident Leader podcast, Roxanne. How are you doing today?
Doing so well, Rahul. Thank you for having me today. It's an honor.
Absolutely. And your experience and the work that you have been doing to create that consciousness amongst our leaders is truly impeccable. I'm more eager, as well as our listeners are, to know about your journey. What made you do what you are doing today? Share with us your leadership journey, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Ever since I was a little girl, I just had this tender knowingness that I wanted to serve, and I didn't know what that looked like or what that felt like, but I knew that I needed to create an impact.
Hmm.
And, I went through life. I did the academic route. I had, incredible careers that I really always worked from the bottom and always, was promoted and worked hard and had, strong ethic. And then a moment had came throughout my career that I had experienced my first near death experience. And that was a catalyst moment for me to really, be in the self introspection and really in that inner reflection of, am I actually following the path that I felt that I was intended to from such a tender age? And the answer was no, and the answer was no, that I wasn't serving the way that I was meant to. And I had to sit with that for many years to really understand what I was being shown and what I was being asked and where I was being guided. And then I had 3, simultaneous near-death experiences shortly after that, which kind of catapulted me into my own, further understanding and understanding of myself and how I actually wanted to embody leadership and how that I actually want to show up to
Hmm.
impact humanity, from a community perspective, from a national perspective, and from a global perspective. And how could I do that? And how could I foster more love into leadership, more human connection, more human, centric solutions? And how can we bring that forward into the leadership platforms for our global leaders? And that's kind of where my journey led me, Raul.
And I think what you just mentioned happens to most of us. We start with a very positive intent,
Yeah.
but over a period of time, due to the strenuous work hours, due to the work environment, the culture, and sometimes we lose the path, and there is not many people available to guide us for towards that right path. So I think what you are narrating is not uncommon. I have seen it with many individuals, and I like the concept that you are bringing up, which is the human centered leadership. So tell us, to our audience, what does human centered leadership looks like in action, especially in this fast paced as well as this competitive corporate environment?
Yeah, absolutely, Raul. And I really want to touch on something that you touched on. And the piece of where we lose the intentionality of what we've come to be in connection with to create a further impact. But in that journey, we also lose a piece of ourselves, and we
Mhm.
lose the intentionality of all of our innate power. And how do we actually lead from that place and not lead from a place of burnout and a place of having to do something instead of really wanting to show up and be in that passion base of that fire in the belly? The piece about the human connection and the human centric solutions is that as the world evolves, and naturally it will evolve, we know evolution is a thing. We have evolved from just the last 20 years and how we, interact with technology, how we lead business, how we market, how we initiate sales, all of these things, and how we interact with our people. And what we're seeing is that there's such a high differentiation of where we actually retain and where we have retention with our people, where our people feel valued, where they feel heard, and where they feel like they're serving a greater purpose. And it doesn't mean that the business structure has to be in the spiritual concepts or the conscious concepts, but it means that people want to feel at the end of the day like they're making a difference. And then how do we orchestrate that? How do we create that environment? How do we create the openness? How do we be open to feedback and receivership so that we can actually lead from a place of human connection and not just the bottom line and not just about, how do we get things done? Obviously, there's, that aspect of doing lean processes and doing things seamlessly, but how do we do that with human beings and not just treating them like machines and like
Mhm.
just get it done?
Absolutely, and I think in today's environment where the AI is playing a very big role, and the leaders are being questioned only about the bottom line.
Mhm.
At times, we are only focusing on the number, so people are no more people; they are just a number. And I believe that the moment we differentiate from that people centric approach, we see people losing hope, people losing their morale. And also, I have noticed, Roxanne, is sometimes people or the leaders are they are misjudged if they are very human centric, if they are very people oriented, if they are not taking those harsh call. And I believe that they are misunderstood, that they are not the right fit, or they are not good for the company. But I feel that ultimately it is the people who are able to get the job done.
Absolutely.
And
I think you're highlighting something so beautiful here because at the end of the day, as human beings, we have core fundamental needs that we need to actually feel fulfilled, not just within ourselves. Obviously, we have that accountability as conscious leaders to have that own inner fulfillment. But when we're in interaction, when we're in exchange, and when we're in engagement, we want to feel heard. We want to feel valued. We want to feel seen. We want to feel like we matter. When we bring into conscious leadership and we bring somebody that is in that human connective piece and is aware of, the surroundings and how every aspect of the business impacts another human being. It doesn't mean that we're not having challenging conversations, but we are showing up at those challenging conversations and we're bringing compassion, we're bringing humanity, we're bringing kindness, we're bringing patience, and we're bringing teachings and learnings and all of these pieces into that conversation. That is the dynamic shifter. Right? We are growing community leaders, and it doesn't mean they're going to lead a business structure, but they're leading in their household and they're leading into the communities that they serve, and how they feel and how they emanate is the change. Is
yep,
it's the being.
yep. And I think many clients that I work with, Roxanne, they give me a problem statement that, hey, attrition is not an issue, productivity is not an issue, but we feel that our people are not giving enough. They can do more. They are not giving their best. And I think that's the point that you are bringing here, is that consciousness, that human centric approach, and how we create people who are more multipliers and not just working in the individual capacity. And I see, and based on the reading I did about you, you speak a lot about leaders either as a multipliers or dividers. So how do you help those individuals shift into a multiplier mindset? What would be your inputs or guidance to those leaders who really want to become those multipliers?
Absolutely. And there's no good and bad. And I don't want anybody to feel, like that hesitancy of like, oh no, like am I this or am I that? But at the end of the day, when we look at a leader and we look at the cultural dynamic that they are creating, they are the role model. They are the point of vision where people are choosing to walk with them on their mission to be able to succeed and to be able to help that business thrive and stride and all of these beautiful things. So when we're in the mindset that we are more in the divisiveness of our leadership, where we're serving a little bit more from the ego, and the ego is not a bad thing. There's times and places where the ego needs to be instilled, but when we're leading from the ego, or we're worried that somebody's going to have more knowledge than us or have better leadership than us, and we're in that perpetuation that we don't want somebody to be at our level or be better than us, then we're naturally coming from a belief system or a wounded pattern of experience or expertise that we actually can't allow somebody to rise up in their own individual strengths. Not one leader is the same. Every leader brings different strengths to the table. So, how do we bring up our leaders? How do we encourage our leaders? How do we support our leaders to come to the platform and deliver their strengths and offer their strengths to the business structure instead of removing the strengths from the business structure and wonder why things aren't working as seamlessly as they can be because we're not actually utilizing the identified strengths that are being presented to us because we're in a state of fear, right? That state of fear of like, I don't want them to, be at this level. I don't want them to, take my position one day. All of these pieces, even though they may not be conscious, they're subconscious thought patterns that are tied to a belief system that we can be replaced. And
Mhm, mhm.
and at the end of the day, how do we shift that mindset? How do we fix that belief system? How do we fix the structural component of where that's created in the foundational pieces of the values? And how do we shift that to know that everyone has a contribution and everybody has strengths? And how do we actually honor that? And how do we support that? And how do we guide and lead that?
Absolutely. I think one of the experience I had where a leader was sabotaging people who were rising up
Yeah.
just because he felt that they are threat to him.
Yeah.
And I think the quality of a leader that I see is how many people they have developed. It's not about how much revenue they have generated.
Yeah.
Yes, revenue is important. Those numbers are important. That is what pays our bills.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, is from a leadership perspective, how many leaders you are able to build is really uh, a testimonial of your leadership quality. So focusing
Absolutely.
on the strength, not focusing from that ego-centric mindset is one of the differentiator. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and I think that, again, you're touching on something so powerful because in that conceptualization of we're leading now, when we're leading in a place of fear, we're leading in a place of our own perspective and our own inner perception, and we're not actually looking at the bigger picture. And
Mm,
as leaders, we need to be visionary. And it doesn't mean that every leader is going to, have the visionary strength, but we need to be visionary of the overall how do we contribute to the greater purpose and how do we contribute to that by utilizing those strengths and identifying those strengths and elevating those strengths. Because if I don't feel like my strengths are being utilized or I don't feel challenged to actually grow and to expand, my passion to be there no longer resides.
mhm.
So how do I actually honor that? I want to keep good leaders and I want efficiency and I want to have a better bottom line. But at the end of the day, if your people aren't producing because they don't feel valued, it's irrelevant.
Right. So from your perspective, one of the research I was reading, which talks about less than 11% of corporate America leaders, they are self-aware. And self-awareness, I do see is critical component for a leadership. Now, so the leaders who are self-aware, how they can move from self-awareness to that true self-mastery, focusing on the self-actualization, healing, as well as accountability, how they can focus on that, identifying that true self-mastery.
Yeah, and this, I think speaks of even leaders that maybe may not be self-aware as well, right? It all starts with one choice to evaluate and to sit with a decision or how we choose to show up in either reactivity or proactivity, or how we choose to show up in engagement or conversation or communication with, with our team members. And do they feel recognized? Do they feel like you know their name? All of these pieces that come together. It's just those small incremental things that we become aware of. And that discovery of that self awareness is, where do I have self accountability? Where do I have self acceptance? Where do I need to actually pivot and change? And what is actually limiting me, because we are limitless? What is actually limiting me from being the leader that I truly desire to be? Maybe every leader's goal isn't the same, but at the end of the day, when we think about the human being's desires, not the leadership desires, is that we all want to feel acceptance and we all want to feel not even just acceptance of ourselves, but we want to feel acceptance into community. That is a huge part of our structural piece of being a human being.
Mhm.
So, what are those elements that are actually separating us from that? And what are the elements that actually don't feel good in the energetic resonance of how we show up in a day? Does it feel good? Do you feel empowered? Do you feel like you've empowered somebody else, or do you feel disempowered, and do you feel like you've disempowered somebody else? What does that exchange feel like? And then the density of what that is when we carry that into the physical body is also greatly significant. So
Mhm.
we have to be able to sit in reflection and not always be reactive or to shy away or to be in fear of what is actually the rootedness of why we're actually conducting ourselves the way that we are.
Oh, you are bringing another great point here is around that self-reflection. I have experienced that many of us, we do not spend time with our own self. We spend a lot of time in talking about others, but hardly spend time. And that's where that self-reflection come in. Self-reflection as soon as you complete a meeting, self-reflection as soon as you do a particular task to evaluate whether you did it well, whether you could have done differently, so that next time when you have to do the same thing, you know what you need to do. So thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah.
Uh, Roxanne, while sharing your introduction, you spoke about some moments, catalyst moment that really transformed your life's trajectory. Uh,
Mhm.
how those moments really shaped up your leadership path, how you made sure that you came back to your inner purpose, to that goal that you started your leadership journey with. Share with us what kind of things happened and how did you pivot from there?
Yeah, absolutely. For those catalyst moments, I mean, when you go through one near death experience, let alone four,
Ah,
um, it's pretty like it's in itself is just that those deep moments of real awakening and real understanding and understanding of yourself and really understanding how precious life is and how such a gift it is to be here, to be able to offer exchanges with one another and to be able to be in commune with one another and to be able to be in conversation with one another and to be in connection with one another. That is our most powerful state of being when we are in a state of love and acceptance and happiness and fulfillment and peace. We are running at the highest caliber of who we are in the vibrational alignment of what we are. And that's how we attract and that's how we manifest even deeper connections of that nature and different, pathways of that nature as well. So when we are in that state of remembrance of who we actually are, and sometimes we don't have a moment for self-reflection if we're back to back in our meeting schedules throughout the day, but do we have reflection before the evening before we fall asleep? And
mhm.
how could I have shown up to be, the leader that I choose to be? It's not about being better, but how can I choose to show up to be the person that I truly wish and desire to be? And every moment we have a power of choice and the power of decision to be able to choose a different pathway of how we want to show up. So for me in those awakening moments, it was how can I actually impact humanity and how can I bring human connection back into what we do and bring love back into what we do? And it doesn't mean that there isn't going to be duality. It doesn't mean that there isn't going to be polarity, but how do we actually be the change that we wish to see throughout, global stages and global communities? And how do we actually actionize that? And how do we come from a place where we're actually in the embodiment of it and we are in the integrity of it that what we lead with is who we are and who we innately are behind closed doors in our own personal leadership of our life.
Mm,
And that is the piece, right?
sure. So, another golden nugget being dropped is how you do the self reflection, at least do it once a day. And you always have a choice. You always have a choice how you want to react to a particular situation. There is no right way or wrong way, but the choice is always ours. Roxanne, for leaders who are listening to us, if they have to take maybe one or two steps in order to do that inner healing, what would be your advice to them? Where do should they should start? What should be the first thing they should do to focus on that inner healing?
Yeah, I love that question, Rahul. That's one of my favorites. There is this piece also that you touched on and about our choices and that every choice has an outcome and every choice has a pathway and we are presented with hundreds and thousands of different pathways that we can take at any given moment should we choose to lean into those pathways. That self-actualization of the healing is no different. That is an intentional choice. Am I living in sufferance? Am I living in pain? Am I living in dysregulation? Am I leading too much in the mental body? Am I leading too much in the emotional body? Am I leading too much in other ways that I'm running out, right? Because we are meant to be in harmony with ourselves, within ourselves. So If I am calibrated too much in my mental body, one, that's exhausting, but it also has an impact on my emotional body and my physical body and my energetic body. How am I actually able to understand why do I actually do that? Why am I actually calibrating more in my mental body? Why am I more analytical? Do I, have to analyze everything thing that comes into, my peripheral. There are those elements of like, what is that actually connected to? What are we actually serving from? Are we serving from fear? Are we serving from scarcity? Are we serving from lack? And are we looking like we never want to make a mistake? So we can't celebrate, some of our failures that we go throughout life. And those failures are actually just missteps, right? They're not about the failures. It's a growth moment. It's a moment of growth. And how do we actually use that to be a catalyst for us to actually have even deeper introspection within ourselves of why do I actually believe the things that I do? And how am I showing up to actually lead in those ways? What is that actually connected to? What boundary needs to be put in place that I am not putting myself into a burnout situation and I'm actually honoring myself and actually still getting everything done that I need to, but I'm learning how to actually do that as a leader by delegation, by leaning on my team, by utilizing different strengths. All of these pieces start come together in that one moment. So when we are self-actualized healing, what belief systems, what patterns are we prone to, and how are they serving us? And if they're not serving our highest alignment, then how do we actually shift the narrative? How do we rewire the brain? How do we rewire the emotional body? How do we come back into that context and actually do the deep body of work so that we can actually lead from a place of peace, inner fulfillment, and know that we are always in regulation and that external factors aren't bringing us into dysregulation, then we're leading from those places.
Wow. And I think most of the time, we most of the leaders, they focus on that perfectionism,
Mhm.
and that's where they are too hard on them. And I have learned with through hard steps that there is no such thing called perfectionism.
Yeah.
It's always shade of gray. So you need to focus on things the way it is happening, and instead of just identifying that purple squirrel. And because of that, we are too hard on ourselves. So I really like the way you mentioned, take help from your team, take uh, take uh, take help from others, rather than doing everything on your own, because you just want everything to be the way you want it to be. So I think that's definitely will help people in healing their inner self and becoming more stronger, learn from their mistakes, learn from their failures, rather than just hiding those failures, or probably thinking that, okay, why did I do that? It's all it's happening.
We shift that into maybe being humor or something that we can laugh about, and the exchange becomes greatly different. What
Mm.
happens is that, again, those core values, belief systems, is that if we did something that we weren't supposed to as a child and we were disciplined for that, for that failure, for that mistake, or whatever we chose to do, then we take that into the embodiment, and that ends up being a natural reaction that we have every time that we experience a misstep. And when we step into that place of having a misstep, it's exactly that. It's being able to change the way and anchoring a different emotionality to it and knowing that everything is okay. We are human. We are meant to have missteps. That's part of our path. That's part of our journey. And without those missteps, we don't actually accumulate a piece of the puzzle that actually, defines a little bit more of the greater vision. So if we never have learnings and we never have teachings and we want everything to be perfection, well, the reality is that perfection is imperfection and imperfection is perfection.
Hmm.
So when we look at that and we know that, perfectionism is really tied to an anchored belief of worth and value. How am I going to be perceived? How do I perceive myself? How do I accept myself? But we should be able to accept ourselves in all of our aspects, in all of our shades, throughout all of our pathways, and not just in the good.
Absolutely. Wow. Great point that you are making, that we should accept ourselves the way we are, rather than the perception that we have of our own self. So thank you for bringing it up. So Roxanne, before we move to a rapid fire round, If the listeners of our episode, if they want to connect with you, the leaders, if they want to deepen the work of human-centered leadership in their own organization, what is the best way for them to connect with you?
Absolutely. So they can connect with me through the illuminationretreat.com. And my contact details are there. And I do a lot of private mentorship and stewardship with a lot of leaders. And there's a bunch of different packages that would resonate with what they're looking for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we're moving to our fun rapid fire round where we will be asking 5 questions.
Yep.
And without thinking too much, we would want you to respond to them. Okay. All right. So here is the first one for you. Uh, a quotation you live by.
Be the change you want to see in the world.
Are you a morning person or a night owl?
Night owl. More creative flow.
Yep. Yep. What's one daily routine you never skip, no matter how hectic is your day?
Ceremony and a lot of breath work and working out.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And what's one leadership skill you wish someone would have taught you earlier?
Mm, to lead in ways to build other leaders up from the get go.
And the final one, if your career were a Netflix series, Roxanne, what would be the title of season one be?
4 near death experiences led me to leadership.
Wow. Yeah, that's very, very creative and unique. And I'm sure people would be willing to spend their time in watching that episode. So, well, thank you, Roxanne, for being on the show and sharing your insight, sharing the valuable experience that you have gathered over a period of time. Before we let you go, is there any final word of wisdom you want to give to our listeners?
I just want to leave with this. And I just think, there's no more powerful words than this is to believe in yourself and believe in your leadership and believe that you always have a choice to make a difference and to create a different impact. So that is what I would like to leave on, Raul.
All right, very good. And before I let her go, I will share my learnings from the show. And this is a time for you to mention your learnings from the episode in the comments. For me, the first one was be a leader who is a multiplier. Focus on knowing the strength of people and focus on making them a multiplier rather than just leaning to what they are bringing to you. Number two is be more self aware and be more self accountable rather than focusing on accountability to others, focus on being self accountable. uh, Another one was self reflection, at least do once a day if not more. And the last one is just focus on delegation. Focus on taking help from your team rather than just doing everything your own self. And have that human centric approach. Numbers are important, but it is the human that will lead the way. So that's something that I learned from the episode. There were many golden nuggets drop in throughout the show. I would encourage all the listeners to mention in our comments what was their biggest takeaway. On that note, thank you again, Roxanne, for being on the show. We really wish you all the success and wishing you the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Raul. It's an honor. Thank you so much.